Hey everybody, happy Thursday. I'm going to jump right in. Forgive me for looking down at my notes. Today we're talking about reactivity, and I want to give you something that you can start doing today when you have a reactive dog that will help a lot in most cases. So most people think that reactivity means more training, right? More training because you have a reactive dog. But I want to give you one small change that you can make today without teaching your dog anything officially, and it can lower reactivity pretty much right then. If we're meeting for the first time, my name's Brianne, and I am here to teach you all things training and enrichment for your dog. And let's jump right in, right? So again, I've got my notes to keep me on point. So I just want to say that the biggest change that you can make. No, let me go back and say that yes, you have a lot of training to do when you have a reactive dog. Yes, you do. But there's also management. And what I want to give you today goes along with the management side, right? It's something that will help your dog to not be able to rehearse the reactive behaviors. And that is a big key in reactivity training, because when they rehearse behaviors over and over again, they become habits, and then they're habits that are harder to break. So management is key, especially in the beginning. So the tool that I want to give you today is when you think that your dog is about to be reactive, I completely recommend that you create as much distance as possible as early as possible. So this is the single biggest change, right, that I can think of that will help you in your reactivity management. So basically you are trying to catch it before your dog reacts, right, which can be difficult, and it's not always going to be possible. I'll tell you that right now. And I'll try to remember to give you a tip on what to do if you missed it, right? So reactivity usually happens when the dog is too close, too fast, for too long, right? Those are the big three, when they're too close, too fast, or too long to a trigger, right? That's typically when reactivity happens. So when you give your dog distance to that trigger, you're giving your dog a chance to stay under threshold. We can talk about thresholds in another video if you're not sure what a threshold is. But basically you want to keep them under that line, right? Where they can still think and still manage themselves appropriately without reacting. So the thing is when you move on to training reactivity, training can only ever happen when your dog can still think clearly, right? And if they are in the middle of a reactive episode, they cannot think clearly right then. So that's what you're trying to do, is get them in a situation where they can still think, they can still focus and hear you, right? And distance is what's going to help that happen. So what does this look like in real life? You see the trigger. Let's say your dog is leash reactive to other dogs, right? So you see somebody walking their dog and they're heading straight for you, but they're still like a block or two away, right? So you cross the street immediately. Cross the street before your dog locks onto that trigger, ideally. If you're not able to cross the street, you step off the path. You step away from the trigger as far as you can to give your dog that space, and enough space to keep them still being able to focus and hear you, right? If you need to turn around, instead of pushing them through a reaction you know they're going to have because they're too close, do that. If you need to take walks during less busy times of the day, right, do that. If you need to go somewhere where there are wider paths and better options for you to get off that path if you need to, do that, right? So this is management. I get the pushback a lot sometimes that, well, you're just avoiding the problem, Brianne. Like, they're never going to learn anything if you're constantly avoiding the problem, right? And that's true. That is true. But what I'm giving you here isn't avoidance. Again, it's management, because we want to keep your dog in a state of mind where they can train, where they can still listen. And distance is going to give you that, right? So for those times that you need to turn around, for those times that you need to get the heck out of there, right? If your dog is already having a blow up reaction because a dog came around the corner and caught you off guard, do what you got to do to get them far enough away from that trigger where they can finally let go, right? They look somewhere else other than the trigger. They're going to be looking at the trigger for a while they're popping off like crazy. But as soon as they can let go of that trigger, I would have them sit or do something for you right there because they can listen again, right? Get them back under control as soon as you can, but don't try when they're in the middle of that bark, 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 bark crazy phase because they're not going to be able to hear you. They're just going to ignore you. You're going to get frustrated. They're going to be frustrated, right? So that's what you want to do in the meantime. But when you're able to create that distance, that's when training can happen, right? If they are still under threshold and they can listen to you, they can start to learn to take in the trigger from a far enough distance that they can still stay with you. And I'll go into more of that in more videos. But what I wanted to give you today was distance. Do what you can to not let them rehearse that big reactive explosion, right, that they have with their triggers. Do what you can to try to avoid that and keep them at a far enough distance where they can take in the information. I want them to look, right? I don't want them to stay focused on you or have to look at you or anything other than their trigger. I want them to be able to have a calm brain while they look at their trigger from a far enough distance, and they can still sit and stay for you, or they can still walk with you without losing their minds. So anyway, we will go into more on reactivity in other little short videos, but today I wanted to give you a management tool, and later on we'll talk about how you can train reactivity as well. I want you to know that giving your dog space does not mean that you're failing. It means that you're listening to them, right? And you're managing their environment so that they can succeed, right? And that they can get this. I hope this was helpful. Please share it with someone who could use this help as well. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Drop your questions about reactivity or anything else that you would like to see in future lives. I'm always looking for content ideas. So let me know what you want to learn about. Have a great rest of your Thursday, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.